50-foot mast. I had a racehorse with a blue ribbon path. I smoked cohibas Castro gave me for free. I drank bourbon that was older than me. I had connections that went straight to the top. I sold my stocks off just before they would drop. I bathed in champagne, swam in fine wine, spent $1 billion that was never even mine. I just got richer with each scheme that I tried, but I got too hungry, couldn't be satisfied. They finally caught me, I'm the talk of the town, and it's a long way down. Blacklisted in Bougieville, blacklisted in Bougieville. I'm on the run, the deal is done. Blacklisted in Bougieville. I'd fly my Learjet straight to Tokyo for zero sushi and get it to go. Jet to the Alps to ski on a whim. Hop to the Seychelles to go for a swim. Over to Bordeaux to pick up some wine. Then drive my Lamborghini straight to Tuscany to dine. To Brussels for truffles, wrap and go leave. Last stop Paris pour un boisson digestif. I stole from Peter so I could pay Paul, but I went crazy, I wanted it all. They finally caught me, I'm the talk of the town, and it's a long way down. Blacklisted in Bougieville, blacklisted in Bougieville. I'm on the run, the deal is done. Blacklisted in Bougieville.
Welcome to the Friends of Dan Music Podcast. I'm Dan Miles. You've been listening to the music of Jon Herington. Jon was on the show around 3 years ago when we spoke about his Time on My Hands album. We also spoke about his previous solo work and his experiences performing and recording with Steely Dan. That was episode 49, in case you want to go back and check it out. This time around, we'll be focusing exclusively on his new album. Joining me on the Skype with some difficulty, my fault, not his, from Bougieville, New York, is Jon Herington. Welcome back.
Good to be here, Dan.
Well, before we start delving into the new album, I want to briefly cover a few events that have occurred since your last visit. First and foremost, last time we spoke, I'd seen Steely Dan twice in concert back in the 90s, but that was before you joined them. But back on July 15th, 2014, I saw the current lineup when you guys passed through Phoenix. As great as all the music was, I think the most memorable thing about the night might have been Keith Carlock's fluorescent pink shirt. I mean, he was looking like the Energizer Bunny up there and playing like him too. I mean, have you guys ever talked about that? Did he like lose a bet, or he just likes to?
I don't recall that actually, but I'm surprisingly non-visual in my orientation.
Nobody else on stage went that route, and he's up on the riser too, and he's sort of center stage. The reason I mention it is that 2 of the 3 reviews, the reviewers commented on it. But,
wow!
You quickly
I remember that he is like the Energizer Bunny. He definitely has power to spare.
Well, he replaced Simon Phillips on the latest Toto album, which was produced by my friend and past guest C.J. Vanston. He told me that when he first met Keith and saw his, let's call it, unorthodox grip on his drumsticks, said he initially had some doubts. But, of course, once he heard Keith play, I'm sure he thought, yeah, we're going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, it looks a little different, too. He sets up the kit. He sits kind of high on it. He's a big guy, and so the angle of the drums is unusual, and but it makes sense when you look at the way he plays. So he's sitting at the same angle all the time, and he has a very relaxed grip, that's for sure.
Relaxed, there you go. Unorthodox, relaxed. What you want to do? CJ was like, "Are we sure this is the guy?" Then he plays. Yeah, this is the guy. Well, in terms of your own playing, seeing you live, it's forced me to come to the realization that you're actually a better guitar player than I am. How dare you? No wonder Walter and Donald haven't been calling me. That's got to be the only reason. During the week or two leading up to that show, you were posting reviews of all the previous gigs, and I was making a point of not reading them because I didn't want any set list spoilers.
Oh, right.
I wanted to be surprised, but I think actually they were kind of mixing it up every night anyways. A lot of the reviewers were commenting as much on what didn't get played, not really complaining. Actually, it was kind of like, hey, they didn't play Do It Again or Deacon Blues or any of this stuff, and the crowd still loved the show because people kind of want to hear the deep cuts, And the thing that surprised me was, Walter, his image is sort of reticent and quiet, and he has this big, long rap he was doing in Hey 19, and everybody was kind of smiling through that, not only because it was relaxed and funny and cool, but you didn't expect it coming out of him.
Yeah, he's a very funny guy. I always enjoy that. And yeah, that's kind of a feature of the night. He has a couple chances to MC, and he takes them. It's kind of fun.
It was hilarious. And of course, your longtime friend and collaborator Jim Beard was there as well. And another development since we last spoke is Jim has been on the show too.
Oh, really?
Talking about his own excellent solo work. That was episode 69 for anyone who wants to go back and check that one out.
He has a beautiful solo piano record out. So it's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. We talked about it, and we talked about all of his stuff. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that on our 5-year anniversary special, we invited listeners to shout out some of their favorite past episodes, and yours got a lot of love.
Oh.
It was definitely a fan favorite. Okay, so the new album is rather suggestively called Adult Entertainment with artwork that simulates, a brown paper bag and Scotch tape. So what made you want to present the material as possibly being unsuitable for minors and something that needed to be concealed from fellow adults?
Well, it's really not that risque, but I think when we were, the record has an interesting beginning. My band was playing quite a bit after we released Time on My Hands. That was, as you said, about 3 years ago. And we were feeling like pretty clear about what was working with our audience live because we were playing so much. Certain tunes were going over because of the lyrical content, and so I don't know, somehow like Dennis the bass player, and I began to get together sort of casually when we were back home, and I was home for a while, and he had an idea for a song, and so we came over to the studio and we kind of worked on it for a while, and in a few days we had the first tune, and I wasn't thinking of making another record at all. But we were sort of on a roll, and we were having some fun. So Dennis came back the next week, and we started another song and finished that one. And they were sort of coming out pretty regularly and pretty consistently. And they all sort of were our attempt to sort of take a certain kind of theme and kind of sort of up the ante a little bit on the sort of humor and the entertainment value of the songs. And before long, a couple months, we had like 10 or 11 songs, and I said, wow, we almost have enough for a record here. I think we might want to think about doing that. And I think somewhere in the middle of all that writing we were doing, when we started realizing what the subject matter of the tunes was, and how it was kind of the thing that was connecting the songs in our minds. I think that's when the idea for a possible title of the record came up, and because it's some of the stuff is kind of poking fun at aging, and it's a little bawdy and a little risque, but not. I wouldn't say there's any explicit lyrical content. It doesn't need one of those on the front.
No,
but it's kind of fun and sort of silly, and we had a lot of fun writing it, and a lot of fun recording it. And it just sort of, it's about the easiest record I think I've ever made. And so the packaging was an attempt to reflect that element of it. And it's the brown paper look on the outside, but when you open it up, it's all sort of multicolor, and that's where the
oh yeah,
the fun
definitely
side. And that's supposed to be that's what the music is supposed to be like too.
Oh yeah, I can't remember an album where the inner liner notes were more different from the cover art. I saw Susan Johnson had a design credit. Is she branching out?
Yeah, she's well, she wears every hat I throw at her, and
So is she gonna play a marimba solo on the next album?
you never know. She might surprise you.
We're going to talk through every track. We're not going to listen to every track, but yeah, the thing about fun, definitely every element of it, lyrically, musically. When we discussed Time on My Hands, I mentioned how I enjoyed how you incorporated so many different genres. On this one, I think you've expanded that even further, amazingly. I'm hearing elements of jazz, rock, funk, pop, soul, country, big band, Motown, novelty even, and with an abundance of your trademark humor. So it's a fun listening experience, and you can tell you guys had a hell of a lot of fun performing it. Running down your supporting lineup, you're retaining your basic core band, yourself on guitar. You already mentioned Dennis Spantman on bass, Frank Pagano on drums, Jim Beard on keyboards. There are also some other guests who we'll identify at the appropriate time. And as with the last one, in terms of the production on the album, there are a lot of cool and effective enhancements in the backing tracks that really set it apart, from garden variety rock recordings, a lot of subtle touches that really serve the songs sonically, make it a good, headphone album. So the song we heard at the beginning of the show is called Blacklisted in Bougieville. Am I correct in surmising you're deriving Bougieville from bourgeois?
Yes, exactly. It wasn't a term that I ever used, but you do hear people, particularly younger people than I, use bougie as a sort of as slang for bourgeois, of course. And so I when we came up with the title, I made sure to sort of vet it with a lot of people. I said, would you get the idea if you saw a title like that? Would you get what it was about? And they all seemed to say yes. So I said, okay, we can go with that.
Well, with me, it was after I saw the lyrics that kind of clicked. Is this about a specific individual, perhaps with initials BM?
Yeah, well, it certainly is a Madoff story. It's not. That certainly was on our minds because of the news. He was in the news when we were thinking of that tune, but it wasn't meant to be, specifically about him. And unfortunately, there are many of his ilk. So,
well, yes, given what happened to the U.S. economy, we can all relate to the concept of a white-collar villain.
Yes.
We didn't listen all the way to the end, but you conclude the song with a suggestion that he's going to end up being a larger prisoner's love object. So is that a bit of wish fulfillment?
Well, not really. It's, again, it was just we were letting ourselves go as far over the top as we could.
It's fun, a little bit of acting there on your part. Most of the keyboard playing on the album is by Jim Beard, but who did play piano on that track. But you're credited on Hammond B3. So is that because he wasn't around that day?
No, some of the simpler things, and I think on that tune, there's probably just a couple little effects that are sort of little commentaries on the lyric. There's that verse, let's see, what is it about? I don't know, he's going to Tokyo, and I playing some little response to that lyric. And then there's this thing you can do with when you turn the organ off while you're playing it. It kind of like the pitch kind of is affected, and it slides kind of down. And that sounded like the those sirens in Europe, when
well, both of those are very noticeable.
The Doppler effect when the ambulance is or the police car is on, it's moving past you, So
your organ playing was like special effects.
That's special effects.
That's cool because those are two sort of like highlights. You went with an all saxophone horn section, giving it that Savoy truffle feel.
Exactly, that's what we're going for.
Did Stan Harrison multi-track all the sax?
He did, yeah, and he did a fantastic job. It's just what we were looking for, and he and I go way back. He was a college roommate of mine for 3 out of 4 years.
I would imagine the horn players are used to playing in a section at once, so him to, make it be his own section. Is that something he's done a lot of, or? Yeah,
I think he has done a lot of it. I've had him do it for me way back on the Shine, Shine, Shine record. He played on She Reminded Me of You the same way. I think it was just 2 saxophones on that one, but. Yeah, I'm sure he's used to doing that. Get asked to overdub for to double their parts a lot, and horn players are used to that. He's a fabulous section player, and as you can hear on "Handle Me with Care," particularly. But but also, he was comfortable with that whole.
Well, in a studio, it's economical to have one horn player multi-track. The live setting, it's a little tough.
Particularly economical when he's an old friend, let me tell you.
Really, you buy him some White Castle and then play on your
I'm a better dinner than that. But
Yeah, I should imagine, yeah. A theme that runs throughout the album is your usage of a pretty comprehensive variety of guitar textures. You play in a number of styles with a number of tones. You really emptied out the old toolbox on this one. I don't know if I can think of a guitar style or tone that isn't on the album.
Oh, well, we had a little fun with that. Even in Bougieville, there's a little bit of a nod to the Abbey Road Beatles, ending at the ending of that record where they have the 3 guitar sounds and solos alternating, trading off, So I tried to do a little imitation of that kind of concept and used 3 different guitars. I had one of them was a Gretsch and another one's, I think, a Les Paul maybe, or an SG, and I forget the other one. Maybe a Fender, some kind of Telly or something. I don't know.
Well, it isn't just different guitars and different amps, it's different playing styles, and
Right.
It's cool. It's cool. It's definitely the nice thing is I wouldn't even call it a guitar player album because even though there's all the great guitar, all the instruments are great. The songs themselves are great. So it isn't like any one thing is dominant. It's just as a guitar player and as a music fan, you notice it, just like you notice your Asian B3 part and your sirens and stuff.
I had a lot of fun with the guitar stuff, and it was interesting. I mean, on Time on My Hands, I really began thinking about the whole record, just thinking about the guitar and presenting a certain kind of soloing style of my own. And it's pretty consistent. There's some different sounds on that one too, but I stretched out a lot, and it was a certain kind of playing, and I really that was my jumping off point from that whole for that whole record. But on this one, the songs were what came first, and I didn't really think about guitar solos until we got to the recording, and then I would ask myself just pretty spontaneously, just based on the character of the song, what does it need or what would be fun, and I remember a couple times just trying to go a little further and into some uncharted territory for me with effects and occasionally with more like doublings or even like a whole a guitar section. I mean, there do seem like this one has a lot more variety that way, and it feels the spirit of fun, and that was the point, I think.
The spirit of experimentation too. I mean, You can kind of tell. It's like, he hasn't done this before. He tried it. It worked. And I have to say that I find myself in this situation quite often, which is when I really, really love an album that someone's done, and then the next one comes out. I always have this fear and trepidation that I won't like the new one as much, and I like the last one so much. I was thinking, oh man, I've had this with other guests we've had on the show and in general. So it's always kind of a relief when you put it on and you think, oh yeah, this is an evolution. It's not a replacement for the other one. It's
certainly not. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, I guess part of it was that I mean, even though I in some ways I was proudest of Time on My Hands because I set out to do a particular thing, and I was happy that I felt like I did the best I could at it. But when I look back at it and I was beginning to make this new record, I said to myself, well, that was hard. I don't think I'm going to work that hard on another one. And I didn't want it to be the same kind of approach anyway. So luckily, we had songs before I even was thinking about an overall conception for the record. And I think that was what made it easier to make and more and just allowed it to be much more fun because it was so spontaneous and so it was just unplanned. And I tried to keep the same sort of spirit about the guitar stuff, and I think we kept that spirit in that way too.
No, definitely. Organic things are always good. A few episodes back, we had Bill Smith on, who's an engineer. He was working with Yes. Sort of the key lineup had gotten back together. They weren't planning on doing any new material. They were going to do like a concert in San Luis Obispo, and they just ended up writing like an album's worth of original material just because they were together, and it just happened,
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Time on My Hands, on that one you had a song called E-Girl that addressed the role of the internet in our modern lives. That was about being infatuated with a girl who you were unlikely to meet outside of a virtual setting. So this time you're taking on internet trolls. is your Little Big Shot character based on anyone in particular, or is it a composite of the type?
No, it's just a sort of a general observation about those strange temptations, new temptations of the internet, and the sort of whole idea of personality and the ability to the attempt to engineer it, in a way to kind of control it. It's a very social media is a very unusual thing. It's new territory, I think.
I think of Roger Waters' title, "The Bravery of Being Out of Range," which is that, you can do and behave in certain ways that you really wouldn't in real life. I mainly use the internet for research and shopping. I mainly use Facebook for promotion, though not exclusively. I also maintain some friendships there, but I try not to participate in the flame wars, which are always so unproductive. On the rare occasions that I've ventured into that territory, I've always regretted it. What I do now sometimes is I'll write a response that I want to give, but instead of actually posting it, I just delete it. So I get it out of my system that way. I get it right up to the point where I'm going to share it, and I go, nope, not going to do it.
I wish people were like you, though.
Well, to use a term within a term, you've got all the keywords in there. You've got profile pic, Photoshop, cybercred, like, poke, tag, tweet, all the lingo of the web. And I'm surprised more writers don't do that because everybody can relate to it. Jim Beard plays a very distinctive Moog part, which you've placed very carefully in the mix because it's the kind of thing you have to keep a handle on. It has a sort of theremin quality to it, and that you really hear the in-between notes as he slides between the notes. And it reminds me of those, you mentioned Abbey Road, those finger ribbons, like the one Paul McCartney played on Maxwell's Silver Hammer. You slide your finger up and down. Was he do you remember if he was manipulating the tone with a knob or a pitch wheel, or how he did it?
It's a mini Moog, and it's the portamento feature. I think it probably is something you can sort of set so that when you lift your finger off the key, it maybe just, there's a way to set it so that it just kind of just descends all the way to nothing.
That makes sense.
To as low as you can hear, or as the instrument can produce.
Yeah, so he used a Moog. He didn't use a.
It's a mini Moog, I think. It's right over here. We have it right here, but I let him do that. But
he didn't use a patch. He didn't just use an imitation.
No,
it's
you can hear it. Mini Moog. We have. We're lucky in my studio here. We have a real B3 and a Leslie. We got Jim's old Wurlitzer, his beautiful Rhodes of his. The only we have a piano, but it's an old clunker that he grew up playing. We don't have a real piano in here, so that's the only thing we're missing. But so all these, we're pretty well equipped. Otherwise, got good.
You can hear the difference. And people, I'm going to play the track, and people will hear the difference. It sounds like Keith Emerson showed up or something.
We had fun with that.
And you also constantly pan it, left, right, center. You keep it moving. Yeah. So I'm saying that's the kind of part. In this context, it works, but putting it wrong in the mix, it'll be distracting, and burying it too much. What would be the point of having it?
Be careful about the mixing. That brings up a point about the whole record for me. I mean, that sound and those kind of panning effects. I mean, they all sort of harken back to the '60s for me, and that's kind of where I got formed as a listener and as a writer ultimately, and as a guitar player, and. Besides the lyrical content, I think the thing that, for me, that allows this stuff to hang together as a record is that it's all sort of inspired by the pop music I grew up listening to, and at that time, FM radio was so diverse, and it was kind of like an anything goes thing. There weren't corporate programming companies. I mean, it was individual DJs making up their minds about what they'd play, and so lots of interesting, quirky stuff, including Steely Dan, could get regular play if somebody happened to like it, and that, I mean, there were records that the Stones used to make, records, and you could have a country tune right next to like a Motown cover and a deep blues, deep Southern blues track, and then a Mercy beat kind of pop thing like that they do, all on the same record, and nobody blinked. I can't resist sort of letting some of that, diversity happen, and I didn't want us to try to narrow the range of it. I just wanted to have fun with it. So, well,
the DJs were music fans, and the people listening to the radio were music fans.
Of course.
These days, I don't think either of those are true. I think it's automated, and the listeners are, in terms of being discerning, it's hard to say. You could call a radio station and ask them to play something, and they'd play it. It's like, whole different trip.
Yeah, it's a different world.
But in terms of your own performance, it's funny you say that because on a specific track, you've got, a vocal homage to Roger Daltrey. And
That's right.
and guitar-wise, I guess we'll call it an homage to Jimmy Page. I can't quite
Yes, it
determine
is, yeah. No, it
okay, it's because it could also be interpreted as a bit mocking.
No, those are all like very heartfelt thank yous and tributes, and then my way to have fun with it too. I mean, it's the lyrics are mostly unreliable narrators, and our tongues are in our cheeks, and because of that, I felt like the most lighthearted approach possible was called for, with all that stuff, and so I just let myself very, very liberally go in directions that just felt natural, and in this case, absolutely, I was thinking of, these are little tributes, I mean, this is all already we've got like Beatles, Stones, The Who, like Zeppelin, and those are like I said, I was kind of formed musically by that British invasion.
As was I, and as was my listening demographic. But what's so cool about it is musically, you've got, the prog homage with the Moog, you've got the My Generation homage, you got Jimmy Page, but then the lyrics are totally modern because when that stuff was done in the 60s and the 70s, nobody knew the internet from...
No, it's true.
So it's time for some music. So let's give this a listen. I mentioned to Susan when she sent me the advanced copy, I hadn't even finished listening to the whole thing yet. When I got to this track, I wrote to her, I go, well, there's an instant classic, Little Big Shot. Definitely a favorite. So let's give it a listen from Adult Entertainment. Here's Little Big Shot.